All right, I wanted to add a little bit extra of this. So this will probably be the first video that I post. And the reason for that is I've got 5 sections, about a half hour a piece, that will follow this, but they're more of an analytical perspective about the themes and the story and the plot points and the architecture of the story itself and the lore and the history and all of it kind of meshed together. So I kind of time jump in order to kind of put a cohesive thought together about each of the different elements. But I wanted to kind of review kind of a baseline understanding of the timeline, the story as it goes, just kind of like a topical level. I don't want to get too in depth about the chapters or the characters or the character development, or the intrigue per chapter. It's definitely worth it to read the book. But I just want to start out and kind of explain the key characters, the events as they happen. So the book starts out with the clock. With Frex and Melina, the mother and father. Frex is a unionist minister. I'll explain what that means in another video. Melina is the daughter, the heiress of the eminent Throp seat, which is the political head of state for Munchkinland. And she is the second descending. So her father is the eminent Throp, and her daughter, the title typically goes to the females in the family. Her daughter will be the eminent Throp, third descending, and that will be Elphaba. And then, of course, Nessa Rosa's fourth descending. And we'll go into, how they inherit those roles later on in another video. So, we're introduced to Frex, we're introduced to Melina, and we're introduced to their marriage. They're happy. She kind of married this minister to kind of get away from the political life of where, in this family that she didn't necessarily, she's kind of vapid. She doesn't want to be serious about anything. But he's a minister, and she saw him as a ticket out, and she took the opportunity, but then he would leave her and go preach for long times at a time, or long periods at a time, and then she'd be bored, and she wanted to talk to other people. She wanted to have socialization, and ultimately she ended up wanting to have sex. And so we are introduced to her being pregnant, and she talks about being ready, like she's going into labor, and he's like, well, I can't, I gotta go. With the clock of the time dragon is coming in to try to steal our people away, and lead them down the path. And she's like, really, you're gonna choose that over your daughter? She's gonna be born. He's like, the devil's coming to town. And she's like, don't say that, your daughter is not the devil. And he's like, I meant the clock, like, come on. And so they kind of have like this little fight and stuff like that. So he ends up going to proselytize. She ends up, going into labor. The Clock of the Time Dragon does its thing, and rebel rousers kind of watch the show that goes on, and Frex is trying to preach against it, and the Clock of the Time Dragon turns the crowd of drunken men against Frex, this minister. And so they chase him, he goes and hides, he survives, but they want to kill him, and they want to kill his wife too. So all the wives who are sober are like, oh, she's having a baby. Let's just kind of hide her, and then we could figure this out later and beat our own husbands when they're sober. And so Elphaba ends up being born within the Time Dragon. So they hid her inside of the apparatus of this machine. And she's born, but she's born green. And so that's the key foundational main struggle that she starts her life with. So we go into some story where her nanny, Melina's nanny, comes into town, or is brought into town in order to help her take care of this terror of a child. And she's just eating weed to kind of make herself high all the time. And Frex can't do it. He's got to, go wherever. So they want Nanny to be the nanny. And Nanny's like, she's green. So Frex, bye, go. Melina, let's have a little chat. Is this his baby? And Melina kind of does like, how dare you? But then she's like, well, there might have been like this one guy, like he got me really drunk and I kind of blacked out. So I don't know. It could be his child, but who's to say? I don't care. And she's like, so this baby's already starting off on a great foundation of faith and trust. So we go from that to fast forward, I guess, maybe, I don't know, maybe a year. So Elphaba, she's not talking. She's got sharp teeth like a monster, and she's green. and she's allergic to water. So Melina's just sitting there living her little like life of boredom, and she's really thinking about like, I'm really horny. That's really how it goes. And Frex is gone. He's been out preaching. He's doing his job. And this quadling comes by, and she describes the quadling as being sexy. Like, for some reason, she doesn't know why. It's weird, but it's like, it's the way he talks and the way his body moves. And she's just like, ooh, come on, papa. And his name is Turtleheart. And so he kind of woos her, tells her some stories. He blows some glass, like makes this little mirror that he gives to Elphaba as like a trinket. And she's like, he looks at it and says, oh, your husband's gonna be here. She's like, oh, when? And he's like, tonight, later. She's like, okay, well, let's go to the bedroom. Elphaba, you're good, right? And then she goes and they bang it out. Frex gets home, finds Elphaba, finds her with this piece of glass. He's like, oh my god, take it away from her. And that's how he learns that Turtleheart is there. He's like, oh, I made it so it would never break. And Frex sees that Turtleheart is very good with the baby and that she's weirdly calm with him when she's not like that with anybody, even Nanny. So he's like, all right, I like this guy. We're going to keep him here. Whatever he's doing, I want to be ignorant of it, but whatever he's doing, he's keeping my wife happy. I'm happy because I can do my job, and the baby's happy, and Nanny's off my back. So, all right, let's keep him. Over time, he ends up like really kind of growing fond of him, and they describe it as flirting, but you know, there's a couple episodes where, you know, they're out talking, and Melina ends up like storming into the bedroom, and Nanny comes in and says, you know, how long have you been pregnant? She's like, what, you knew? And she's like, of course I knew. And so she's like, I went to the Emerald City. I took that little green bottle that you gave me from the guy that you think might be Elphaba's daddy. And I said, I don't want this to happen again. No green baby. And this lady, Mother Yackle, gave me a pill. And then she says, take this pill every day until the baby comes, and the baby will not be green. Boom. Yay. So then we fast forward about 18 years, 16 years maybe? I don't know. So she's a teenager. She's going to college. We're talking about Glinda. Galinda of the Arduinas. She's this posh, upper class, whatever girl. She's on a train. Dr. Dillamond, this goat, this talking goat with a capital G, is sitting in front of her, asks her for help, and she's like, she can't be bothered. But she does. She helps him because nobody else is going to. And he's a little condescending to her, but it's because of how she's treating him. And she learns that he's a professor and that he's actually wealthy because he can afford the ticket, because animals are actually charged way more than these little white girls. So they get to the school, and at one of the train stops, her chaperone, Alma Clutch, had actually stepped on a nail, and Alma Clutch had to go get it taken care of. So Glinda actually ends up at Shiz, the school, Crage Hall, but without a chaperone. So she's standing there with all the other girls, everybody's chit-chatting, and then Madam Morrible comes out and says, all right, girls, let your Almas figure out who your roomies are. Well, Glinda has no Alma. And so all the girls pair off and then disappear, and then Madam Morrible's like, all right, everybody's going to be going to the dorms who doesn't have an Alma. She's like, whoa, I have an Alma, but she stepped on a nail. She's like, I've failed to see how that's my problem, but okay. She's like, can I talk to you in private? I don't want to say this in front of the other girls. And so she takes, Madam Morrible's like, all right, fine, whatever, brings her in. And she says, well, my Alma, she kind of has like this accident a long time ago that like makes it so she can't tell if something's alive or dead or not living. And so sometimes she thinks like a human being is not alive and she won't take care of it. But then, you know, there's this inanimate object over here that she's having a conversation about its past life. And she's like, oh, what an interesting affliction. Well, since that's happening, we'll make an exception. But here's the thing. We have a girl that needs her help. Will your Alma be able to take care of her when she gets here? We're talking about Elphaba. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. As long as she doesn't have to live in the dorms. And then she finds out that Elphaba's green. In the Broadway musical, they make a whole big spectacle about that. You know, the play is a completely different beast from the movie, or from the book. The movie's going to be just like the musical, maybe a little bit of elements of the book, so maybe a marriage of the two. But anyway, they end up going to school. They end up going through classes with Dr. Dillamond, the goat that Glinda had run into on the train. And Dr. Dillamond is kind of alluding to them about some of the chaos that's going on about the story. of animals being segregated, or, you know, animals with a capital A who have a soul and can speak and wear clothing and have education and hold offices of power and can travel, are being treated like normal animals with a lowercase a. And their rights are being stripped from them by the Wizard of Oz. And so Madam Morrible holds a poetry, and she says some poetry, and Dr. Dillamon is offended, and he runs away, pissed off. He starts doing some research to try to prove that animals are different than animals. And in the process of that, Clutch ends up stumbling upon his murderer. And so Clutch is suddenly stricken with this affliction that she can't remember things, and she's talking to inanimate objects, and Glinda in her mind is like, wait, I made that up. And Madam Morrible is just sitting over there like, whoa. So it leaves the girls with an issue. They have no chaperone, and now they got to go back into the dorms. But Madam Morrible says, but we have an option. Fast forward to another chapter. We got Bach ends up going. Bach is a Munchkinlander. He's actually short, not tall. Elphaba and her sister are actually tall Munchkinlanders because they're interbred with Gillikinese, the normal tall humanoid people. So they're not short, and they rule over the short people classes. So Bach ends up going to the train station because the girls are forbidden by Madame Morrible, and Bach collects Nessa Rose with Nanny. Nanny is what the suggestion was by Madame Morrible, since Clutch is stricken with this unknown illness. Nanny has to come and be their chaperone, and that forces her to bring Nessa Rose to Shiz a year earlier than she should have been. We fast forward. There's some class stuff going on. They're all teaching. I'm gonna go over like none of this. It's all character development. It's not really super important to the story, except you get there's a part where their father Frex ends up sending a pair of glass slippers, not ruby, glass slippers with like a silver color, for Nessa Rose, his pet, because she is religiously afflicted just like he is. She's Papa's baby girl, preaching the unionist faith. She's very dogmatic, whereas Elphaba is a little bit more atheistic. Not quite atheist. She's more like antagonistic. So, of course, Elphaba's jealous. She's being, she's kind of like, she isolates herself, and she's kind of like irritated. She's trying to like secretly use Bach to go into the library of the boys' school to kind of get some information about Dr. Dillamon's research. And at the end of it, obviously Dr. Dillamon is found killed, murdered. By who? And that's when Clutch, whatever. So Elphaba's still in this, when Nessa Rose arrives to Shiz, she's in this kind of brooding, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, what I believe, where I stand, what do I stand for? And so eventually Clutch does die. And before she dies, Glinda is able to magic her to consciousness for a brief moment, not permanently. And she says, I saw Grammatic do it. Grammatic is this TikTok automaton that is kind of like the butler or servant for Madame Morrible, so it's her lackey. But of course, Madame Morrible's not in the room, and it's just the girls and Nanny, and they hear Clutch say what she saw before she died, or before she got sick. And so they all like, we have to keep this to ourselves. Do not tell Madame Morrible nothing. I want to kind of move this along. Just a little bit of the story. Madame Morrible kind of brings the girls in and says, I know you're not going to tell me what she says, but I hope it wasn't about Grammatic, because he found her, and who knows what her fantastical brain would think when she sees him, with blood all over his hands and a knife. No, he was trying to save Dr. Dillamon. No, I didn't kill him. Well, they're like, okay, yeah, sure. But Elphaba wanted to actually leave Shiz to go talk to the wizard and be like, you need to know what happened. But they needed an opportunity. But before that could happen, Madame Morrible brings them in, says, Nanny, get the fuck out of the room. And the three girls are there, and she says, I'm putting you all under a spell. You cannot talk to each other or anybody else except me about what I'm going to tell you. You also won't remember we ever had this conversation, and you won't believe it. It'll be like a dream. I am secretly recruiting all of you because you have an innate power for sorcery. and I'm going to force you into this conscription of being the adepts of different geographical areas to serve the purposes of me and my master and our government, the wizard. And so each of the girls leaves, they get sick, they pass out, but they can't ever talk to him. They just kind of have this like feeling in the back of their brain that something's wrong, but they can't express it. So after the funeral, they all get drunk. They say some, they have like a memorial for Alma Clutch. And then Elphaba is like, we're leaving, you and me, Glinda. We're going to the Emerald City and we're talking to the wizard now. We're not waiting. Everybody else is like, yeah, we're going to go get pissed and go to the Philosophy Club, which is a sex club, and make some shit happen. They all walk into a situation they were not prepared for. Meanwhile, fast forward, the girls are on a train. They go to the Emerald City. They say that they're representatives of Madam Morrible. That gets them on the docket to get 4 minutes with the wizard. And they get in there and they say what they wanted to say. And the wizard's like, I don't give a fuck. He's like, actually, I want to know what you can do for me. Like, let's spin this on its head. Is Madam Morrible, like, what do you know about her? Or let me like milk you for information. And they're like, we're out of here. And it's at that point that Elphaba decides, this is not the life for me. I stand for something better, greater, and this man is corrupt. Madam Morrible's corrupt. And so she gets Glinda back on a train, gives her some food, says, you need to leave. You're never going to see me again. This is goodbye. Tell everybody that I love them and that I forced you to come here, and they'll believe you. And so now, Glinda obviously doesn't want to, but she has to. She has no choice. So she goes back to school, and then we fast forward, I think it was 5-7 years, somewhere around there. And it's from Fiyero's point of view. Fiero's walking around the Emerald City. He's graduated from Shiz. He's trying to find a cloister of Saint Galinda, who has now been prompted into put on a pedestal, let's say. And so there's statues revering her good deeds, the good witch, foreshadowing. And while he's doing that, he goes into this church that has a statue of her in the back that hasn't been defaced. And he goes in and he finds a woman praying. And he's like, I know her. She's green. He's like, Elphie, it's me. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, who else is green? Hello, you're green. You can't deny that. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so they have this little exchange. She's like, all right, fine, whatever, calm down. I'll meet you outside in 45 minutes. And then she tries to shake him, but he's a tracker because he's an Arjiki prince from the frontier. So he knows how to track a beast. So Elphaba is trying to be sneaky. She gets back to her apartment. He's like, there you are, Fabula. And she turns around and accidentally, she was so caught off guard that she accidentally admitted by looking at him that he recognized her. And she's like, God damn it. She's like, fine, you can come up and talk for a brief moment. Fast forward, they end up exchanging some ideas about what they believe in, what they stand for, and then he tells her about his life, she tells him nothing about her life, and then he tells her about how everybody's doing is Shiz and what's going on with Glinda, what's going on with Nessa, what's going on with Bach, etc. And then they bang it out. And then they become lovers. So they have this little 8-month affair or something like that. But he knows that she's doing something surreptitious and ends up trying to convince her to give up this life and just run away with him. She's like, you're married, and also I'm doing this for a reason. I can't walk away from that. This is my integrity on the line. I have to commit to this. I'm sorry. So she tells him, you need to be out by Christmas Eve. Sorry, Lorleanus Eve. And she's like, there's something going to go down. It'll be better if you just weren't here. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. But he lied. He followed her, but then he was stricken somehow magically with a bout of diarrhea. He had the bubble guts like no one else. He had to run back to her apartment because it was the closest place. He blows this place up, lights a match. The cat's looking at him like, ooh, why are you here? And then the shadows jump out at him and he is captured. And that is the last we hear of the actual story of him that is not hearsay. So we assume he died. Elphaba, throughout this event, probably magicked him into that little diarrhea, probably caused him to go back to the house, and now she feels guilty for killing him. But first, her target was Madam Morrible. It didn't go well. Madam Morrible lives, and she is found at a cloister or a montery, which is more like a nun convent. And, you know, she's bloody and silent, and this woman takes her in, Mother Yackle, again. Mother Yackle also was the door person for the philosophy club where all the kids got sexed. The weird cabaret show that ended up in like traumatizing PTSD shit. So Mother Yackle's popping up all over the place. We'll talk about her also in the future videos. And so Elphaba's at this Monterey, and then we skip forward another 5-7 years. She's being given to this caravan to go to the Vincas, and she's being released from her Mont duties, but a stipulation of her leaving this convent is that she has to take this kid with her, this orphan. And so she's like, whatever, he doesn't mean anything to me, but if that's how I get out of here, fine. And Mother Yackle tells her Saint Elphaba. We'll talk about that also, the meaning of that name and why she's called that. But encourages her to go to Kiamoko, which is Fiero's home, his castle. And she needs to confess to his wife about everything, about getting him killed and sleeping with him, etc. Also, as we come to learn, that child, his name is Lear, and it is alleged that he is her son and that Fiero is the father. That's important because, hello, the second book's called Son of a Witch. But, you know, again, spoilers, but obvious because it's on the cover. But they end up getting to Kiamoko, and she kind of makes cozy with the family. And Sarima, his wife, is like, you're not allowed to confess. This is my house. I will tell you when you can unburden yourself. But for now, no. And we'll talk more about that later. But she basically is like, you're trapped here until you can free yourself. And as long as I tell you you can't confess, then you stay here and you keep us safe and protected. So it's kind of a, like, political maneuvering there as well, but I think secretly Sarima knew, and she didn't want to admit it, or she was in denial. She thinks that he was having an affair with Galinda and that her husband is who killed Fiero, but there was no body. Where did that go? So we fast forward through a lot of different stuff. She goes and like revisits Nessa Rose. She visits her father. At one point she sees Galinda. At one point, Fiero, before he died, had actually seen Galinda as well, and they talked about Elphaba and things like that. So the story is a lot of, you know, interpersonal relationships and character development to kind of bolster, you know, the meaning behind the relationships that each of them have. But ultimately, the point here is we fast forward to the murder, and the murder is referring to the house being dropped on Nessa Rose. Nessa Rose has now become a tyrant. She has inherited Elphaba's position as the eminent Throp, fourth descending, because Elphaba abdicated by disappearing and just, you know, they know she's alive because Nanny ends up going to Kiamoko and helping her raise Lear. Oh, he's your son, but you won't admit it, huh? Nanny knows. And so, you know, there's a lot of intrigue there too. It's interesting just watching how they all communicate, because we know the story of the witches from L. Frank Baum and also from the Hollywood film, The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland. But so we know that the house was dropped and that the Wicked Witch of the East, the tyrant, their governor, was killed. Ding dong, the witch is dead, the witch is dead, the witch is dead. Glinda the Good Witch comes and gives the ruby slippers, which are not ruby in the book, to Dorothy. We talk about why later, but obviously Elphaba is not too happy about that. The girl goes down the yellow brick road to find the wizard, and Elphaba is left to go attend her sister's funeral to talk about the politics of the land. At the funeral, she is confronted by her father. She's confronted by Galinda. She explains to Galinda, like, you should have given those. You had no right. She's like, I've been more of a sister to your sister after you abandoned her than you ever were. Those shoes were more of my right than they were to yours. Well, she promised them to me over her dead body that she would give them to me when she died. Okay, well, you can go get them off of that girl's feet. That's their fight. But you come to learn that, you know, the ultimate goal was to get the slippers out of Munchkinland, because the next visitor that comes to the funeral and has a secret rendezvous or meeting with Elphaba is the wizard himself. And she can't bring anything with her because, you know, she's a threat. And so they take this page of the grimoire that she had been keeping on her, and they confiscate it. And so while she's having this fight with the wizard, he brings out Nor, the daughter of Fiero, who was at Kiamoko before all of their family got kidnapped and brought to the village for their safety and protection. And she learns that that actually happened because the wizard needed insurance against the witch to hold her in check. And then he's like, but I don't want to talk about that. If you want confirmation of life, here's the girl. And they bring out this like wraith of a little girl, and she's traumatized. And she's like, well, what about Sarima and her sisters? He's like, oh, pretty sure somebody killed them somewhere. I didn't give them permission, but you can't stop people. Well, what about the boy? Because he had two sons. One of them died from an icicle that Elphaba might have accidentally hit him in the head. But the second boy was the heir to Fiyero's princedom. He was going to be the future leader of the Arjiki tribe. And so Elphaba's like, well, what about the other boy? And the wizard's like, oh, he had to die because he could claim his throne. So this girl is the only one living. Her name is Nor. And son of a witch, most of the book is actually Lear going to find Nor and his adventure. And I'll go over the more books, the second, third, and fourth book, and maybe the trilogy that comes after that at a later date. But I just wanted to get through Wicked, especially since the movie is going to be coming out. So ultimately, the wizard's like, okay, I don't want to talk about all that. I want to talk about this page that you had on you. Where's the book it came from? She's like, whoa, wait a minute. What do you want with the book? He's like, that's the only reason I'm in Oz. And she's like, so if I give you the book, you'll give me the girl? He's like, you give me the book, I'll give you everything. And then he's like, actually, I take it back. I'm a little too old. I kind of like the power that I have. So I want the book anyway, and I might think about giving you the girl, so I'll think about it. And then they part ways. This is also where she passes Glinda in the hallway, and this is the last time they ever see each other. And I'll talk more about that later too, of their fight, because they don't make up like they do in the Broadway play. So we fast forward to Dorothy has the slippers. She's on her way to the wizard, and the wizard actually does try to take the slippers, but he can't. They're glued to her. She can't even take them off because her socks are sweaty. And so she's like, well, maybe if I go do what he says, these are actually her sister's shoes. So maybe if I talk to Wicked Witch, I don't want to kill her like he told me I need to. But maybe she can help me get these off and get me home. She might know more than he does. And so she goes to Kiamoko, and with the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow, and her dog Toto too. And she gets to Kiamoko, and there's like this altercation on the ascent. Elphaba wants to know if the Scarecrow is who she thinks it is. We'll talk more about that too, because all three of her companions have an identity. But they think that they're being attacked, so they kill all the animals that she sends, and she's like out of her head. Finally, Dorothy gets to the house, and Nanny and Lear make her a meal, and they're like, sit down, Poppet, have some food, calm down, we're not a threat to you. But Elphaba is just livid, so she comes out, and she's like accusing her, and she's fighting. She's like, why do you want to kill me? Why do you want to kill me? She just keeps repeating it. Why do you want to kill me? Why are you killing everywhere you go is a path of death. You killed my sister, you killed my animals. And she's just like out of her head. And Dorothy is just like traumatized. She ends up like running away. The boys she gives the animal Toto to Chistery, the flying monkey. She's like, take him away, as a threat to Dorothy. And so Dorothy's like, oh no, save my animal. And Lear's like, I'll do whatever you want, lady, because he's in love with Dorothy. And so Lear and they're chasing Chistery to save the dog, and Elphaba chases Dorothy up the stairs to her room. She locks them in there. Everybody's down there trying to get into the room. They're pounding and pounding. She's like, why do you want to kill me? And she's having this huge, crazy, just emotional outburst. And she like catches her broom on fire, and she like waves it at Dorothy, like she's gonna like threaten her, but it accidentally gets her clothes. And Dorothy, being the nice girl that she is like, oh no! Grabs a bucket of water and pours it on her to save her. And then Elphaba melts. And that is the end of the witch. And then we go to learn, you know, that Shell, her brother, the younger brother that killed their mom in childbirth, he was kind of like a spy up in the Gillikin. He went back down to talk to their father, to tell her that, you know, Elphaba is now dead. And, you know, so the book kind of like goes through the aftermath of what happens once Dorothy is dead, which kind of like leaves the narrative open for where Son of a Witch and A Lion Among Men, the two books that followed, go after the politics of Oz and everything. So this is a video I just wanted to put together to kind of do like a breakdown of the chronology of how the story goes, so that when you listen to my other stories, you're not like, who are these people? Ultimately, you're gonna want to read the book. It's important to like it's if you're gonna watch the movie that's coming out November 22nd, it's the 18th right now, you're gonna want to know what's in this book. They're not the same story, but having knowledge of what Gregory Maguire wrote and how it was translated to the musical, if you've seen it or listened to the soundtrack or anything, I've seen it 5 times. You could take both of those and realize that I'm assuming the movie, part 1, is what we're going to get. And then part 2, I think 2025. But the two of those are going to be combined, I think, the movie and the Broadway musical and the book put together and married. So having an understanding of the details of this story are going to enrich the experience that you're going to have watching the movie. Knowing that the movie is going to also take some creative license with the story and the narrative as well. It's not going to match this, and it's not going to match the musical, because the medium is different. The story could be told differently. It might be more effective to say something. The music, you know, may not apply quite as well to more of an opera style in a Broadway musical. Maybe not so much in a movie. So, but we do know that the musical element of it is there because we got Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, and they're both phenomenal performers. So it's going to be an amazing movie. The book is amazing. I've loved it since I was a kid. I read it in high school, but that would have been 2002. The Broadway musical, like I said, I've seen it 5 times. It came out in 2003. I don't remember when I saw the first one. It was original cast. And I have the all of my playbills. But you know, it's important to recognize that the story comes from a deeper mythos, a complete universe that, you know, I've got 3 books right here, but there's a 4th book called Out of Oz, and that's the Wicked Years. And then there's 3 more books that come out, that came out afterward, and Lear ends up having a daughter, and her name is Rain, and she is born green. So now there's no question of the heritage of these descendants of Elphaba, that they are truly her blood, because Rain is born green. And so there's a trilogy that comes on after. It's not part of the Wicked Years universe, but it is a spin-off series. I think it's called Another Day. Maybe I'll read those. I haven't read them, but I heard that the first one's amazing. The other 2 feel rushed, but we'll see. Anyway, the next videos that come up are going to be a breakdown of the story elements, the theology, the symbolism, the different plot devices that are used by Gregory Maguire to tell the story of these witches in the book that I just broke down for you, but more on a analysis level rather than a chapter by chapter. So I hope you enjoy them. I'm doing this mainly because the internet doesn't have anything. I tried to look, nothing existed. There's some like book reviews that are like 8 years old, 11 years old, stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, we are really lacking for any kind of like analytical breakdown, some kind of literary analysis of what happened in this amazing, incredible book. And of course, I'm sure I'm going to find the same with the other books. So I'll try to see if I can put together, like, I got to read them first. The other 2, I'm going to reread them. I'm doing audiobook. And then Out of Oz, I've never read. So I just learned it existed, actually. I'm kind of ashamed. But I'll read that one and add that to it and then see where I go with the Another Day trilogy. But I hope you enjoy. I did it. It's not professional. I'm just doing this out of self-gratification because I wanted it. And so I had to go look it up, and I wanted to share it with everybody because I'm obsessive, and that's just how my brain works. And of course, Wicked is like a fundamental piece of my identity as an adult, a 41-year-old man, sitting here fangirling over the movie that's about to come out in, a week or so. So I hope everybody enjoys the video series that I put together, and I don't I might put it on YouTube. I might just put it on Facebook. But comment, share, whatever you want. I'm here for it. Bye.